Good evening. My name is Dan Malott. I'm a resident of Manville, North Dakota, just northwest of Grand Forks. I'm also serving my third term on the Manville School Board. And this video is just my personal opinion on House Bill 1251. And just want to share a few minutes, hopefully with residents that may have an interest in sharing their thoughts with legislatures or those people that are on legislature that would be willing to just take a few minutes to listen to my thoughts on 1251. 1251, for those who have not heard, basically will prohibit small towns from hiring their own administrator. The specific number that was used was 475 students. So if your district has less than 475 students, this bill would prohibit you from hiring your own full-time administrator. And it would force you to try and find another district that you could potentially share an administrator with. Although, of course, that there's no logistics to that. It's just saying, hey, you have to, you're kind of on your own. The opposition that's been out there mainly has centered around local control and local government, which I fully support. I think obviously in our nation and certainly in North Dakota, I think local control is the most important thing. But there's also a lot of other things that go with that some of them are logistics, but a lot of it is, I think, programs that just require that person. So I wanted to share just a few minutes again for those that are willing to listen. So the local control thing is obviously paramount. It's the first priority of, I think, what most of us would agree in our government. And actually, the irony, in my opinion, is in the 1980s, we had, it looks like 300 districts in our state. And just recently now, I think the number was down to 170. So we've already been consolidating and partnering with other districts, and that's happened organically. It's part of, living in a rural state. We have to make those decisions. And here, even in Manville, we do that. We have certain partnerships. We're members of co-ops, and that's just how we manage the requirements to educate our kids. But that's all been done by the local level with the right partnerships with the right districts. And that's required an administrator to do that and manage that. So certainly local control is the most important, and we've already been doing that for many years. So there's a lot of attention about, administrators are paid so much, and there's all this, I think, misguided information. But if you look at the history of education requirements, I don't think anybody doubts what's been happening for, the numbers I gave you from the 80s to today. That's 40 years. 40 years of legislature in Bismarck getting together every other year. The amount of requirements that they put on schools is extraordinary. It's not just about teaching students, which I think everybody wishes it was, but the reality has been dictated otherwise. And certainly that may be very good for students in a lot of ways, but that requires a lot of complex programs that have to be managed. And so one of the additional things that I think really needs to be considered is our local administrators manage those complex requirements, things like reporting and managing state testing requirements. The financing and the budget is an extraordinarily complex subject. By the way, I'm very happy to see that you're going to be talking about trying to simplify the language. I can for one say that the mill that we use in terms of vocabulary is extraordinarily difficult for many people to understand. But the overall way that we budget our schools is extraordinarily difficult. You would think it's just per pupil funding and your property tax percentage that comes in. But anybody that's in this industry knows that's not even the tip of the iceberg. And then to find out, we're a transition maximum school. That creates another layer of complexity onto budgeting our school. Writing grants and things like that for our schools, also another priority task for our administrator. So managing complex requirements that the state has put on our districts, we've had to hire people that can manage what the state has dictated. And so the thought of losing an administrator, for us, it would be 2/3 of the time to manage what, by the way, Bismarck is looking at even more requirements for our schools this year. I've read in the legislative updates, even more potential programs that we'll have to manage. And at the same time, to be removing someone to actually run that is crazy to me. Our local administrators also do manage those co-ops. So in small districts like ours, we do have co-ops. We participate in co-ops for things like special education for our students that have those needs. We have partnership agreements for us here in Manville. We bus our high school students into Grand Forks. We have sports agreements with our middle schools in Grand Forks. But our young kids, we work with other rural districts so they have a more even experience. So all of those things, we don't have an athletic director. I mean, that's all done. That's that's one of the hats that, the local administrators have to wear as well. They also have to manage local programs. Every school, shocking, is different. And so here in Manville, we do a really amazing program in the summer where we offer migrant education. We have a migrant school in the summer that draws in a lot of kids. And again, while that's a separate funding source, and of course that has to be managed as well. But our local administrators have to wear hats that help facilitate those programs. So again, managing local programs again for us would be like a migrant program. We also have to manage transportation. So we don't have a separate transportation director. That hat is also worn by our administrator. And by the way, I think our administrators, like many administrators, where we're like, oh hey, by the way, we also need you to drive bus too. So I don't know what happens if you take our administrator 2 out of 3 days. I'm not sure if you're planning to send an additional bus driver for us, because we have no way to then bus our kids. So again, that's another hat that administrators wear, is they manage the transportation, and in many cases they help out and drive the bus. Or I do know our administrator here will pick up kids in other schools and move them around. I mean, they'll pick up any hat that seems to be needed for the day. Now, all of those things, so local control, managing complex requirements that the state has put on us, managing co-ops, partnership agreements, managing local programs, again, for us here in Manville, like migrant school, transportation, those types of things. None of that has anything to do with actually managing the school. So, every day, even as a smaller school, I'm going to brain fart the number exactly, but around 170 students with teachers and staff and, all of the programs that go on every day inside the walls of that school require an administrator. So that should be first and foremost is actually managing a school. But all of those other things that generally, again, have come down from Bismarck require us to hire a local administrator. And so it's very, very difficult for, I think, any of us to comprehend how on earth we could be talking about removing an administrator while at the same time I get the legislative updates that, oh, you're going to actually be adding even more programs. And again, I'm not here to say those programs are right or wrong, but everybody knows that the requirements of a small town school is a lot more than just educating students, which, I think we all wish that was it, but there's a lot of other things, and we need our small town administrators to do that. So I highly encourage you to oppose 1251. I think it's a very, very risky bill that has a lot of consequences that I don't think have been talked about, and hopefully those kind of 5 areas will help you make that decision. If you're a resident of North Dakota, I would highly encourage you to contact your legislatures as well, either via email or a phone call. Thank you very much for your time.